Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Bibbity Bobbity Books. My name is Ellie and this is going to be the birthday book tag. Okay, so I wanted to film this tag for a couple of reasons. Firstly, July is my birthday month, so my birthday is on the 17th of July, so I thought it'd be fun to do a birthday related video. And also, I recently passed my booktube birthday, so I actually uploaded my first ever video in June 2 years ago, so I've just passed my 2-year milestone, and so I thought it'd be fun to film a video to kind of mark that occasion, I guess. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you so much if you've supported my channel. Everybody who's watching, thank you so much for clicking and for listening to me rambling on about books. It honestly means the world. I was so nervous to start my booktube channel and I'm so glad that I did, because I've met so many lovely book lovers out there and it's been so fun chatting to you in the comments, and I'm just so thankful for anyone who watches, likes, subscribes. It honestly does mean the world, so thank you so much. But anyway, let's get into the questions, shall we? The first question is birthday cake, a book with a plot that seems cliche but you adore anyway. Now, I struggled with this prompt because I tend to be drawn to unusual stories, and so I don't read that many books with a cliche plot that I adore, so I struggled to choose something for this, but then I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I wouldn't say that I adored this book, but I definitely had a lot of fun with it, and this is the most cliched book that there is. The author uses trope after trope after trope, and I'm okay with it because I went into this story just wanting to have a fun time, and I buddy read it with my friend Martina, and we were chatting and we said that it reminded us of being giddy teenagers. I got that kind of giddy, silly, excited feeling reading this book because there's lots of that kind of angsty romance, and there's a love triangle, and it's got, you know, the chosen one trope, and it's got enemies to lovers, it's got a school where you have to go through these deadly trials, and so it's a lot of fun. It's quite a predictable plot, I would say, but if you're in it just to have a good time, then I would recommend this one because I had fun with it, and I think you'd enjoy it if you like ACOTAR and those types of books, because this is a fantasy romance. It's adult and it's about a girl called Violet who goes to this war school because there's a big war going on, and the kingdom encourage people to attend this war school to train up to help with the war effort. So you can either train to be a medic or a scribe or a dragon rider, and to become a dragon rider you have to go through these series of deadly trials to prove that you have what it takes to bond with a dragon and to be a fighter out on the front lines, you know, flying your dragon. And our main character Violet always thought that she would be a scribe, but she ends up having to train to be a dragon rider because her mum is the leader, the general of the army, and she kind of forces her to train to be a dragon rider. And yeah, as I said before, it's a fun time. Is it cliche? Yes. Did I mind? No, not really. The next question is party guests, your most anticipated book release for this year. So I recently filmed my mid-year freak out book tag, and I mentioned a couple of new releases in that video. I mentioned House of Roots and Ruin, and also Bookshop and Bone Dust, I think it's called, and I'm super excited for both of those, but I wanted to choose a different one for this video so I'm not constantly repeating myself. And I recently saw a book called The Deep Sky, written by Yumi Kitase, and I think this one sounds so interesting. So this is a science fiction, and I'm just going to look it up on Goodreads so that I can read you the actual synopsis. Okay, so it says, The Deep Sky is an enthralling sci-fi thriller about a mission into deep space that begins with a lethal explosion that leaves the survivors questioning the loyalty of the crew. They left Earth to save humanity, they'll have to save themselves first. It is the eve of Earth's environmental collapse. A single ship carries humanity's last hope, 80 elite graduates of a competitive program who will give birth to a generation of children deep in space. But halfway to a distant but livable planet, a lethal bomb kills 3 of the crew and knocks the Phoenix off course. Azuka is the only surviving witness and is an immediate suspect. Azuka already felt like an imposter before the explosion. She was the last picked for the mission. She struggled during training back on Earth, and she was chosen to represent Japan, a country she only partly knows as a half Japanese girl raised in America. But estranged from her mother back home, the Phoenix is all she has left. With the crew turning on each other, Azuka is determined to find the culprit before they all lose faith in the mission, or worse, the bomber strikes again. How good does that sound? Oh, hello, Hades. I think that sounds so exciting, so thrilling. It sounds like it's going to be a page turner, and I'm just very, very excited for that one. So yeah, that's one of my most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. Okay, so the next prompt is birthday presents, a book that surprised you with how much you loved it. So for this one, I'm actually going to go for Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. So I feel like I don't need to give you a synopsis for this one. We all know Jurassic Park, right? You know, it's a story that got turned into a really famous movie franchise. It's about this park that was built, and there are dinosaurs that have been brought back to life that roam around in this park, and it's become like an attraction, but things obviously go wrong. And I am a huge fan of the movies, so I thought that this was going to be a fun time, but I didn't realise how much I was going to enjoy this one, and I actually prefer the book to the movie, and I don't know why I'm surprised by that, because books are often better than movies in my opinion, but I just loved how Michael Crichton mixed creativity with science. So he took something that's so far-fetched but made it seem realistic, because he uses a lot of science talk within the book. He goes into quite a lot of explanations for everything. So you're reading something about dinosaurs, which is kind of ridiculous, but at the same time you're like, huh, it's almost like I can believe it, because we talk about, you know, how they extract the DNA from blood samples found in mosquitoes that have been, you know, kept in amber for many years, and it talks about mathematical theories like chaos theory and things like that, and links that to how things escalate throughout the novel. And it was just so well written, and yes, it's got lots of science talk, but it's not anything that I found that hard to understand. It was written in a really accessible way, and it's such a page turner. You're literally thrown in with action right from the beginning. And although I'm very familiar with the story, I still had such a fun time. I was still right on the edge of my seat whilst I was reading this, and there were some surprises. So there's quite a lot of changes that were made between the book and the movie, so I was never really 100% sure who was going to be safe, and there were some scenes that were really epic that weren't in the movie. I just had such a fun time with this one. So if you're a fan of dinosaurs, if you're a fan of Jurassic Park, I would highly recommend actually reading the book, because in my opinion it's better than the movies. Okay, so the next prompt is Happy Birthday Song, a book that certainly deserved all the hype that it got. So for this prompt, I'm going to choose Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. So this is a literary fiction book that came out earlier this year, and it received a lot of buzz, and I can see why, because honestly I think this is probably one of my favourite books that I've read so far this year. It was so interesting. It's one of those books that blends genres, so it's quite hard to describe, but as I said, it's a literary fiction story, but it also has quite a lot of horror concepts and horror elements to it, a little bit of fantastical elements to it as well. It's quite, I guess, kind of speculative, I don't know. It's a genre blender, and I just thought it was such a beautifully told story, and it's presented in such a unique way. So this book basically discusses a relationship between a couple, and one member of the couple is a marine biologist, and she actually went on this deep sea mission that was supposed to only be for a couple of weeks, I think, and she ends up being down there for a really long time because something goes wrong. And we also follow her wife, and basically we see what happens to their relationship when the marine biologist ends up coming back up from her deep sea mission. So they resolve whatever the issue was, and she ends up surfacing, and she has been changed from her experience down under the water, and she's not really the person that she was before, and we watch how that affects the couple and the relationship, and it's so interesting. It definitely takes a look at grief and how you know, if someone is still with you, you're not really given the luxury of being able to grieve them, even if the person who they were is no longer there, if that makes sense, if someone's changed perhaps beyond recognition. And it's very eerie as well. It's very creepy in the way that it's presented, but it's also very real. I felt like I really knew these characters and I really enjoyed them. They felt very realistic, they had flaws, and it was just so beautifully done. If you're a character-driven reader and if you like the sound of that kind of a story, then honestly I would recommend this one. It's nice and short as well, so you can easily read it quite quickly, and it's one of those books where I don't want to say too much because I feel like it's better to just go into it with no expectations. So yeah, if you want a strange book that focuses in on a relationship and also has some weird creepy elements, give it a go. The next prompt is Happy Music, a book with some very beautiful and truly memorable quotes. So the book that immediately springs to mind for this prompt for me is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is a book that just has quote after quote. I feel like there was passages that I was wanting to highlight or underline on every single page because the writing is just so gorgeous. Erin Morgenstern is definitely one of my favourite authors. I just find her writing so captivating and so beautiful. It's very lyrical, it's very poetic, and you can really tell that she has a real love for language and for stories, and this book in particular is very much a love letter to storytelling. So yeah, I love this one. If you haven't heard of this one before, I would say it's a speculative fiction story, and it's one that starts out with a premise but it ends up kind of going in a direction that you wouldn't expect. But the premise of the story is that we follow a main character called Zachary, who is a student at university, and he ends up finding this book in the library, this strange book that doesn't appear to have an author, and when he's flipping through the pages he realises that there's a section that details an event from his past, a very specific event that happened to him when he was a child, and he's obviously kind of creeped out by that and freaked out that there is a book about him in this library, and so he decides to try and find where this book came from, who wrote it, and the only clues that he has are some symbols that are written on the book's cover. So there's a bee, a key and a sword, and he does a little bit of googling and he ends up uncovering this cult or this group of people that are protectors of a secret library that's hidden underground, and he ends up stumbling into this library and things get more and more surreal the further that he goes into this labyrinthine type library that's underground, and it's so bizarre, it's very strange, it's very surreal, but it's very beautifully written and it has so many wonderful quotes. So I'm just gonna read you a couple of quotes that I enjoy. Hang on, let me find some because I wrote them down. Okay, so there's obviously the very famous quote, "We are all stardust and stories." I love that quote. I also really enjoy this one. It says, "Strange, isn't it, to love a book when the words on the pages become so precious that they feel like part of your own history because they are." I just love that. This is also a very beautiful quote. It says, "There are so many pieces to a person, so many small stories and so few opportunities to read them." Another one that I really love is this one. It says, "Endings are what give stories meaning." I don't know if I believe that. I think the whole story has a meaning, but I also think to have a whole story-shaped story, it needs some sort of resolution. Not even a resolution, some appropriate place to leave it, a goodbye. I think the best stories feel like they're still going somewhere out in story space. I just love that, and it's definitely one of those books, The Starless Sea, that I can just imagine still kind of existing out there even though I've finished the book. I don't know if that makes any sense. And then there's another famous quote from this book that I love, which is, "Everyone wants the stars, everyone wishes to grasp that which exists out of reach, to hold the extraordinary in their hands and keep the remarkable in their pockets." And just one more because I'm obsessed with her writing. I really enjoy something about this quote. So this one is a little bit more random, I guess, but it says, "She is young enough to carry fear with her without letting it into her heart, without being scared. She wears her fear lightly, like a veil, aware that there are dangers, but letting the crackling awareness hover around her. It doesn't sink in, it buzzes in excitement like a swarm of invisible bees." That's that just gives you a real flavour for her writing. She just has such a wonderful way of expressing things in words. I just love her writing and I love that book. So yeah, I had to choose that one for the prompt. Next up, it says, "Getting Older, a book you read a long time ago but you think you would appreciate more if you read it as a mature reader." So for this one, I'm actually going to choose Dune by Frank Herbert. So this is, of course, a classic science fiction story. It's a series, it's incredibly well known and incredibly well loved. And if you haven't heard of this one before, it's a sci-fi that takes place on a planet called Arrakis. It's a desert planet and the planet is quite valuable because it's the only place where you can find this substance called the spice, which is basically a drug that has mind-altering capabilities, and it's incredibly valuable. And so we kind of follow the political drama around who has control of this planet and of the production of the spice. And I feel like that's all you really need to know. It gets much more expansive as you read throughout this series and much more detailed and complex, but that's kind of where we start with the story. And I read this one, the first book, I've only read the first book, many years ago, and I feel like a lot of the details went over my head a little bit. I think now that I've read more science fiction and now that I've just read more in general, I think that I would appreciate it so much more because it's absolutely the kind of story that I would love. It's got a lot of detail to it and the world building is incredibly immaculate, but I think I struggled a little bit when I first read this one to follow it so much. I don't know if it's because it's a classic, so it was written quite a while ago, so it has a distinct writing style, or if I just wasn't used to kind of adult expansive world building. So yeah, that's definitely a story that I want to revisit at some point. I'm just putting it off because it's such a long series and I've got so many series on the go at the moment that I'm a little bit intimidated to start a new massive series, but I do think that it's probably going to end up being one that I absolutely love if I read it a second time through. Okay, and the final prompt is Sweet Birthday Memories, a book that kept you incredibly happy during a sad or demanding period of your life. So I'm actually going to pick a manga that I have recently picked up because I feel like I have had quite a stressful time recently because I am in the process of moving. I have moved from my house in Norwich up to stay with my fiance's parents. We're staying in their house. Luckily they have an annex, so we have a little separate living area, but yeah, we've moved up with them whilst we're in the process of selling our house in Norwich, and then hopefully we'll be able to buy a new property up this way. And it's been a whole thing. There's been a lot of stress, a lot of life changes, and I do feel like my anxiety has been quite high recently. But I have been reading a new manga, and that is One Piece. And this is such a classic manga and I've been having so much fun with it. It's been the perfect light, silly relief that I've needed during this stressful time in my life. The reason why I picked it up is because Netflix are bringing out a live action adaptation of One Piece, and I just really wanted to read the original source material before I watched that live action version, and that's actually how I found out about it really. I'm not really big on manga. I'm very new to the manga scene. I haven't read many manga at all, so yeah, it's the first I heard of it. I thought it sounded interesting because I know it's a pirate story and I love pirate stories. I love anything that's set on the seas, and I just thought it looked like a whole lot of fun. So I started reading it and I've been having a great time. So if you haven't heard of this before, as I said, it's a piratey story about a young man called Luffy who wants to be the king of the pirates, and he has always wanted to be a pirate throughout his whole life, and he one day eats this strange fruit called the gum fruit, and that gives him weird magical powers. It basically turns him into like rubber. Wow, this sounds so random when I'm explaining it. But yeah, it gives him these weird abilities, but it also curses him so that he can't learn to swim. But he doesn't ever let that get in the way of his dream of one day becoming a pirate. And we follow him as he's trying to acquire a crew to become a pirate. And it's a seafaring, swashbuckling adventure with lots of antics, lots of chaos, lots of ridiculousness, and lots of lovable characters as well. And I've been having so much fun with this one. So yeah, it's been the perfect escape that I've needed during a stressful time in my life. So yeah, I think that might be the last question on this tag video prompt list thing. So I hope that you enjoyed my answers. I'd love to hear what your answers would be, so please do drop them down in the comment section below. And I just hope that you're all having a fantastic day, whatever it is that you are doing. I'm wishing you all the best, and yeah, I guess I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!